Okay, welcome to our Erev Shabbat Parashat. It's Parashat Shelah, Hala, and Creation. This parasha, which features, of course, the Hetem Meragilim, the debacle of the sin of the spies, that tragic day on our calendar, which led to many of the tragic moments on our calendar, and Tisha B'Av, that's going to be commemorated in a matter of weeks. Highlights our parasha, but doesn't dominate it entirely. And post that episode, there are a few paragraphs of various halachot, and then another episode towards the end of the parasha. What I want to focus on is the second post a sin of the spies episode paragraph in Parashat Shelah. It's a very small paragraph. It's a grand total of 5 pisukim, and it's located in Parashat Shelah, Perek Tetvav, chapter 15 of Bimidbar, Pasuk Yud Zayin. It features the all well-known mitzvah called Hala. Medaber Adonai al Moshe lemor, daber b'nei Yisrael v'amarta lehem, b'bu'achem el ha'aretz asher ani mavi etchem shama. The pasuk, which sort of stops short, it's like a fragmented sentence, when you come to the land that I'm bringing you towards. And that's the end of the pasuk. But what's extra strange about this pasuk is it's the only structure in where a mitzvah or even an event speaks of coming to the land and doesn't say v'haya ki tabo el ha'aretz or ki yibiacha Adonai Elohecha el ha'aretz, when you shall come to the land and when God shall bring you to the land. Instead it says bebo'achem, when you come. It's more of a passive terminology, and that grammatical structure of bebo'achem, when you come, is not used anywhere else. In any case, we're not going to focus on that. The next pasuk says, "V'haya ba'ach kolchem el lechem haaretz tarimu truma l'Adonai." When you eat from the, so to speak, bread of the ground, meaning when you take from the produce of the ground, be it wheat or other produce, and you create from it bread, tarimu, you shall lift, you shall remove a teruma. Of course, teruma is the word that we use that refers to the portion, the first portion of any produce from the ground that goes to a kohen. But there are other mitzvot that are framed as teruma. This is one of them, more famously, the halat's referring to. We'll note in a moment that is the case. But remove a portion for God from lechem, from bread. Next pasuk further clarifies: Reshit arisotechem hala tarimu truma, ki truma goren ken tarimu ota. Says the pasuk, the first of your arisotechem is the creation of dough, like kneading, Knead, kneading of to make dough, which will make bread. The first of that, meaning the first portion, meaning prior to consuming it, then you shall lift, you shall remove, set aside a portion as a teruma, as a pledge to who? It doesn't say to who yet, and it's not going to say to whom explicitly, but we know from the continuation of the pasuk, like the teruma, like the portion that from the goren, from the threshing floor, from the grain, ken tarimota. So too you shall remove and set aside this portion. Meaning now the Torah just clued us in. It's talking about to the Kohen. Because just like the Turma that goes to the Kohen, the regular quote-unquote Turma, the conventional Turma, so too this form of Turma, which is called Hala, will go to the Kohen. And then the Pasuk, sort of sounding redundantly, says again, Pasuk Kav Aleph, Mereshit arisotechem tetanu latunai Turma latorotechem. From the beginning of your kneading of dough, you shall offer and set aside and remove a portion, and as we said, to the Kohanim, 4 generations, a permanent mitzvah for the future. It wasn't just a one-time, in other words, mitzvah on the spot for the generation of the desert. So just a few facts and figures. This is not going to be a class about the actual halachot of Hala, but it's important just to understand a few of the critical facts. Hala, as we said, is a mitzvah to remove a portion. How much is a portion? Just like conventional teruma, there's no set amount from the Torah. The smallest sliver of bread given to a kohen from what you bake will suffice, and you'll fulfill the mitzvah of Turumah. Midrabanan, rabbinically speaking, Hachamim ask us to take 1/24th, right? So it's a little more than 5%. And for a commercial baker, it's double, it's a half of that, 1/48th of the dough goes to the kohen. It should be post baking, not giving him the dough, but giving him after you have already baked. Is this mitzvah in play today? The answer is no, because the Torah makes it dependent upon and ties it into coming to the land, A, and B, meaning that, first of all, it's only relevant to Eretz Yisrael on a Torah level, and B, we know from Torah Sheba'al Peh, alluded to in these Pesukim, that it's only when Am Yisrael, to a great extent, is living on the land, meaning the majority of the population of Am Yisrael is living on the land of Israel, which would mean, very excitedly, if projections are right, in maximum 10 years, but probably less, that fact will be true. Just like in the laws of the Yobel, the Jubilee year, this technically should return as a Torah law very shortly in our days, B'ezrat Hashem, to Am Yisrael. But for now, it's rabbinical inside and outside of Israel. Even the Hakamim said, even outside of Israel, as a commemoration, we should keep practicing Turumah. There's no Kohen to give to, although technically speaking, you can give it to a minor Kohen. But for the most part, the way everyone in and out of Israel fulfills this, the rabbinical commemorative mitzvah today is by removing a portion from the dough, kazait, prior to baking, setting it aside, putting it in the oven, and basically burning it to the extent that it's not even edible anymore. And that's our commemoration of the mitzvah. How much, but there is still a mitzvah, an obligation today, albeit rabbinic. How much of a dough, a portion, there's different opinions. Practical application, about 5 pounds of dough that's baked together. There are different other scenarios which could obligate us, but that's the general, general directive that we follow. And from that, will actually be beracha. Difference between Sfaradim and Ashkenazim, we say lahafish halal turuma, and we say you take the piece. We say harezo turuma. This is on at least on a rabbinical level turuma, the halal that we're commemorating and removing. Okay, so that's what halal is. Now the truth is, in terms of the reason for the mitzvah, the Sefer HaChinuch brings two very practical, nice, beautiful, but very practical and applicable reasons. Reason number one is, look, even today, bread is something that's very popular in our diets. But there was a day and age, and I'll just say for the vast majority of history and Jewish history included, that bread was the essential, it was the staple of our diet. It was the center of our meal. It was pretty much a dietary need, you can say, and present in anyone who had access to and could afford, which wasn't expensive, whatever. And by the way, it's not just for wheat, so any 5 grains that's turned into flour and then to bread has this obligation. It was always about bread. And that means, says Sefer HaChinuch, that really, Kadosh Baruch Hu gave us a zechut, a great merit, to be able to fulfill a mitzvah virtually in every single meal that we present, make for ourselves, and the potential for beracha then to be, let's say, settling upon the workings of our hands, and in this case, the bread, and they will get a great zechut. Of course, it's a mitzvah, a merit from this new mitzvah, this different, unique mitzvah. Every meal, it's a potential. Kadosh Baruch Hu really was doing us a great favor. And the words of Sefer HaChinuch, it says it becomes, the challah is the dough that is satiation, mazon of the body, and satiation of the soul. It's food for the soul and food for the body, because it is always related to our meals, and of course, nurtures us spiritually as well. And that was, of course, it still is a constant rabbinical opportunity, but it was meant to be constant, could be done multiple times in a given day. hundreds of times a year. So what an opportunity for us to engage in a great merit of this wonderful mizvah. Now, extending from that is the other reason Sefer HaChanuk brings. Of course, it's the opportunity to further support. This is one of the 24 gifts and portions that we offer to the Kohen, the nation of the priestly nation, the Kohanim, to support them. Of course, they didn't work. They were the spiritual leaders of Am Yisrael, and this was a form of support. And by the way, this was an extra favor, and it's you can call it the biggest chesed of all the gifts that we were commanded and are commanded to give to the Kohanim, although it's not in play anymore, from any of the others, because the others were given in their raw state. Could be given in their raw state. Grain, certainly parts of the animal, not to be prepared and cooked and baked and grinded, etc. This was already ready to eat, served, so to speak, on a silver platter. So the Kohen was able to partake in this without any effort, without any time, without any expenditures. Here you go, Mr. Kohen, bechabod, in your honor. And without any sa'ad whatsoever, the Kohen gladly took this wonderful gift called challah. Right, very practical reasons. However, and really, I wouldn't say there's a heck of a lot of commentaries on this 5-pasuk paragraph in the Torah. However, if you dig in and look at Midrashei Hazal and the statements of our great sages, we find some astoundingly grandiose statements of high magnitude about halal. For instance, and by the way, a few of them are in Parashat Bereshit. What are they doing in Midrash Rabbah Parashat Bereshit? Well, you'll see in a moment. On the pasuk of Vayisher Adonai Elohim, that God created man, that's chapter 2, pasuk Zayin. In Bereshit, the Midrash quotes a pasuk from Shelah, which says, Melech b'mishpat yamid ares, the king in justice will uphold or situate the world. That's God, says the Midrash. And Yamid Ares is that God created the world in judgment. Elohim, right? With the name of God, Elohim, Bereshit bara Elohim, in judgment. The continuation of the Mishlei Pasuk is Ve'ish Turumot Yaharsena. And the man of Turumah will ruin it, will destroy it. But the Drasha and the Midrash of that is, this is referring to Adam Harishon. Ish is referring to Adam Harishon, and it's referring to that he destroyed the halah, his halah of the world. Unbelievable. What was his portion? He had an opportunity. He's referring to the sin of Adam Harishon, of course, with the Es Hada'at. And he, it says, obliterated the halah of the world. And now, where does that come in here? Because the pasuk said, "Aish turumot yiharsena," and the Midrash points out to us that halah, as we read in the pasuk, is called Reshit Arisotechem Turumat. It's called Turumah. So that pasuk there is alluding to or hinting to the mitzvah of halah. And Adam Rishon is the ish in the pasuk that, so to speak, ruined the world. So I don't know how halah comes in, but seemingly the sin of man is referring to we're being framed as the halah. And why? Because that was his portion. And he was given a portion, and he was restricted from other portions. And he violated, took advantage of, and destroyed his portion, so to speak. Really, it's just astounding how the mitzvah halah is connected to creation. But if you like that one, then here's another about creation. There's another midrash that says that in the zechut of three things, the world was created. In the zechut of halah, ma'asrot, and bikurim. In the zechut of the mitzvah of halah, giving ma'aser, and the mitzvah of the first produce, first fruits, bikurim. And it proves that by relating all those three are called Reshit, the beginning of, and of course, Bereshit bara Elohim. And Be is interpreted as for the purpose of Reshit. Reshit arisotechem. For the purpose of the mizvah of halah was the world created. As they say, what in the world? What can possibly be the connection of the mizvah of halah? It's a wonderful mizvah. It's one of 613. That in creation, and for that purpose, that's the underpinning of the very objective of God's creation. Where does that come from? Seems like a real stretch by the Midrash. And the Midrash goes further, and this actually is from Bimidbar, but not from our parasha. And it takes notice of the fact that the next mitzvah after Halah in this parasha is when Am Yisrael, Ki Tishgu, mistakenly engaged in Avodah Zarah by a mistaken ruling from the leader, the Nasi, the leader of Am Yisrael. So ask the Midrash, why is the mitzvah of Halah juxtaposed to an idea, a mitzvah that has to do with Avodah Zarah, to tell us that anyone who fulfills Halah nullifies Avodah Zarah from the world, and whoever is negligent in Halah is as if he fulfilled or engaged Has B'Shalom in Avodah Zarah. This is not just hyperbole. This is being said in a very intentional manner by Hachamim. So really, how does Halah all of a sudden take a place in creation and in such statements of impact beyond the very localized practical reasons for the mitzvah of Halah? And I refer you to a historical note that we need to take notice of. And that is, when did the mitzvah of Halah first begin? The day, seemingly, when Am Yisrael came to the land. But was it on the very day, or is after Am Yisrael was able, of course, to enter the land? And then, of course, there might have already been some standing from the previous nations, wheat and the like, grain growing, and able to cultivate it and eventually form it into bread. You know what that coincided with? That coincided with when their regular diet ceased on the 16th day of Nisan, and that was when the man, as recorded in the first chapter of the book of Yeshua, stopped falling. When the man stopped falling, activated was the mitzvah of Halah. So to speak, Halah replaced the man. And the man, of course, represent the divine providence of God, there behind the scenes, blatantly with the man satiating us, providing for us, giving this great nation for 40 years in the desert their sustenance. Explains Rabbi Hirsch as an extension of that. The man, he calls it the man of providence, the man in intervention in the world, is not only a demonstration of Hashem caring for a country, for a nation, but as the Halah does, it enters into everyone's house, into the privacy of people's lives, as the Halah is an extension of the man, and is the ultimate demonstration of individual, what we call hashgaha peratit, divine providence on an individual level. Wow. The Halah is an extension of the great national supernatural miracle of the man falling, the great wondrous act of God's providence and sustenance of Am Yisrael in the everyday lives of every single Jew in the privacy of their homes, that God's hashgaha is there. Maybe not such a dramatic scale and not so blatant and noticeable as the man, but no less there, no less present, no less intervening in our lives and providing us with our needs is the Halah. The paradigm, therefore, in our everyday lives of hashgaha peratit, no less than that is the significance of the Halah. And as he says, it's far-reaching. And now if you take that and contextualize it and frame it and understand what the Halah stands for in our own lives, the Midrashei Hachamim make a heck of a lot of sense. God created the world for Halah, for the mitzvah of Halah, absolutely yes. For mankind to be able to take notice and realize that before you begin taking part of the very basic dietary needs and parts of your diet as you do, take a portion out. Please realize who indeed is providing this, how you got a hold of this, where this sustenance is coming from. Please take notice of this. Adam Arishon missed that. He didn't get the memo in that first sin of Adam Arishon, and that indeed it's God, that there's no reason to rely on something else, to be ambitious and go out of your lane, stay in your lane and understand that God will come to you and provide and sustain. And for that reason, the Hachamim speak about the man in such a grandiose, dramatic way, because in its little humble and practical manner, the man explodes out of its place, its little place, in giving a portion of dough to the Kohen, and puts itself on a grand stage. And that is a model mitzvah to tell Am Yisrael, please remember at all times, in the privacy and the regular routine of your lives, who is your provider, who intervenes, who sustains. And by that, the halal ties itself intrinsically to the man forever and becomes a great mitzvah that every family individual in Am Yisrael partakes in and remembers their Creator at all times. Baruch Adonai L'olam. Amen va'amen. Shabbat shalom.